Hello, good day everyone. We are from the group 3 and our topic for today is all about the laws and legal basis on special and inclusive education. Before we start our topic, let me introduce to you the group 3 members. Chrisan Carr Arcabal, Joanna Paula Bongabong, Isaac Grace Saga, Rochin Grace Olin, Charles Ray Galvan, and I am Baby Lindy Conde, your reporter for today, together with Mr. Charlie Galvan. Okay, before we start our main topic, let me ask you first, what is special education? Special education refers to a range of educational and social services provided by the public school system and other educational institutions to individuals with disabilities who are between 3 and 21 years of age. It is designed to ensure that students with disabilities are provided with an environment that allows them to be educated effectively. The next is, what is inclusive education? So inclusive education is the practice of educating students with disabilities alongside their peers without disabilities in the same classroom. It is meant for all learners and is based on the premise that all students develop and learn differently. Inclusive education is when all students, regardless of any challenges they may have, are placed in age-appropriate general education classes that are in their own neighborhood schools to receive highly quality instruction, interventions, and supports that enable them to meet success in the core curriculum. Inclusive education ensures children to feel a welcoming environment around them. Schools make sure that all children receive a high-quality education and a child definitely school to lessen discrimination, especially for those students who attend schools with disabilities. So here's our main topic for today, the specific legislation and policies to implement inclusive education. Article 24 of the CRPD, as well as the Article 28 of the CRC, asserts the right to education and the basis of quality opportunity for every child. The CRPD also emphasizes that this must be provided in inclusive systems at all levels. It explicitly requires that children with disabilities are not excluded from the general education system on the basis of disability. They are entitled to inclusive, free, and quality education on an equal basis with others in the communities in which they lived. The Committee on Rights of Persons with Disabilities has stressed that it is the entire process of inclusive education that must be accessible, not just buildings, but all information and communication, including ambient or frequency modulation assistive systems, support services, and reasonable accommodation in schools. The entire environment of students with disabilities must be designed in such a way that promotes inclusion and ensures their equality throughout the educational process. Inclusion must be viewed as an integral part of the educational system, not as afterthought. Inclusive education must be viewed as part of a larger goal of using education to make society more just and less discriminatory for all marginalized population. It is more than a technical or organizational shift. It is a cultural and philosophical shift based on a commitment to respect for every child and recognition of the educational system's obligation to adopt to meet her or his needs and rights. Consequently, legislation across all the public sectors should lead to the provisions of services that enhance developments and processes working towards inclusion in education. In addition, the commitment to inclusion education must be elaborated in detail in legislation so that obligations and accountability are explicit. This will support governments at both national and local levels in developing a common approach and being held accountable for ensuring that it is implemented for all children. Now let's talk about the developments in legislatives and policies reform. First, in South Africa, with the introduction of the Policies on Inclusive Education, as published in Education White Paper of page 16 of 2001, the Department of Education made a commitment to ensure that all children would be welcome in all schools and that they would be supported to develop their full potential, irrespective of their background, culture, abilities, or disabilities, their gender, or their race. The concept full service or inclusive school was introduced to show how ordinary schools could transform themselves to become fully inclusive centers of care and support. It is intended that by 2001, 500 primary schools will have been converted to become inclusive, special schools will be converted into resource centers, and circuit-based and district-based supports teams will be established. To date, 30 districts have support teams, teachers training, and workshops have been provided. 30 schools have been provided with assistive devices, and 10 mainstream schools have been upgraded into model schools. One of the success factors was the learning from the past that inclusiveness in society is the only way of living peacefully together. So then in Thailand, the government of Thailand undertook extensive international research on good practice in inclusive education internationally. As a result, it committed to a policy framework mandating inclusion of children with disabilities in mainstream schools. The policy seeks to raise awareness of the right to education for all children with disabilities and to introduce a clear mandate throughout the school system for marginalized children. It introduced a national special education plan and a National Education Act which protected the rights of people with disabilities, including the right to education, under the Constitution, followed by a new policy stating that persons with disabilities must be provided with education opportunities to improve their lives. Its effectiveness to date has been achieved through a process of combining promising international practices with local values and priorities. For the continuation, let's have Mr. Charlie Galvan to discuss about the challenge of maintaining progress.
Good day everyone. I am Charlie Galvan from BPED 2A, so this is the continuation of our report. So the challenges of maintaining progress in development in legislative and policy reform. So in Vietnam, in 2005, their government approved the country's new education law stating that learning is the right and obligation for every citizen and that every citizen has equal rights to access of learning opportunities. So as the result of the policy na-implement sa Vietnam, the survey data from the Ministry of Education and Training in 2005 reported 32% only of 700,000 primary school age children with disabilities attended classes in regular schools. So, di ba gamay ra kayo siya nga percentage out of 700 primary school age? And significant advancement given that only 10 years So 10 years previously, there was only one lower secondary school nga nagka-accept students with disabilities. So imagine, no, isa ra ka school. So 10 years before, isa ra ka school ang naka kuan na to nga mag-accept og disabled students. And also, before, inclusive education is often viewed as an additional burden. So sa ila before, ang kuan daw, inclusive education is like dugang na daw siya nga kanang kuan bitaw, dugang siya nga kakapoy or kahago sa kuan sa ilang kuan sa ilang education before, which is true naman. Like tinuod additional burden siya, pero ang goal man is kanang bisag mga disabled children maka-attend siya school, regular school nga matagaag ka opportunity nga makaskwela bisang pagsayahang disabilities. After initial progress, UNESCO IPE data indicates that Vietnam is moving backwards, with only an estimated 10% of its 1 million students with disabilities receiving schooling at all in 2007 to 2008.6. In order to help strengthen its commitment to inclusive education, a collaborative approach is being adopted. An integrated legal and policy framework covering inclusive education should address all educational sectors and levels. It needs to be comprehensive, coordinated, and comprehensively address issues of flexibility, diversity, and equity in all educational institutions for all learners. These are the key elements nga gusto i-address ani nga legal policy framework. So first, comply with the international human rights standard. So this is part of the human rights because especially children rights nga maka-eskwela, it's not a privilege, but it's the rights of every children to go to school with or without disability. Include a clear definition of inclusion and the specific objectives it is seeking to achieve. Third, guarantee children with and without disabilities the same right to access mainstream learning opportunities and assure access for individual learners to mainstream education and necessary support services within all levels. So, ginagaranti ani nga policy nga normal man ka na maka-disabilities, dapat same ang rights, same ang opportunity, same ang attention nga ginhatag sa organization, sa government, sa mga private sectors pa diha, dapat same ra ang opportunity nga ginhatag. Fourth, develop a policy framework for inclusive education at the central level that supports the policy, practice, and culture of inclusion across all levels of the mainstream education system. So this policy framework, gina-develop niya ang mas ginatabangan niya or gina-enlighten niya ang education sa isa ka country or isa ka lugar na mas ma-improve pa or matabangan ang mga disabled students nga tagaan sa lang equal opportunities, equal rights sa education system bisan pag na sila mga disabilities. Fifth, ensure that policy, provision, and support are consistent throughout the country. So this policy gina-ensure niya nga ang inclusive education is consistent throughout the country. Kanang na ang focus na ang intention, ang interest ani nga policy nga matagaan o opportunity ang dili lang ang normal as children but also have a disabilities nga mga students. 6. Introduce accessible monitoring mechanism to ensure that policy together with the requisite investment is actually implemented. 7. Recognize the need for reasonable accommodation to support inclusion based on human rights standard rather than on the efficient use of resource. 8. Ensure that all legislation that potentially impacts upon inclusive education within a country should clearly state inclusion as a goal. So dako kigatabang ning policy no kay gusto niya i-cover up tanan mga needs, mga chances for inclusive education nga mas matutukan siya nga mas ma-promote siya, mas ma-improve siya and to have equal rights nga mahatag. Then provide a consistent framework for the identification, assessment, and support required to enable children with disabilities to flourish in mainstream learning environments. So this policy also, legal policy framework, ang gusto siya nga mahatagan og consistent framework for the identification ang mga disabled students nga mas ma-flourish sila sa learning environment ilang maybe skills bisag kuan sila bisag nasa disabilities naman sila skills na sila talent so ginatagaan sila equal opportunity nga matagaan sila room for improvements bisan pag they lacking normal life. The next, introduce an obligation on local authorities to plan and provide for early learners, including children with disabilities within mainstream setting and classes, including in the most appropriate language modes and means of communication. So, this policy also introduce an obligation to local authorities nga magplano sad and magmutabang og provide sa mga learners especially disabled students na matagaan sila mainstream setting and classes including the most appropriate language modes and means of communication. Then provide guidance to education institution on how to fulfill their duties through increased inclusive education provision. So this policy also want to teach the education institution on how they will act their responsibility and how they will hold their work, their kanang ilahang responsibilidad sa unsaon nila pagtabang sa mga disabled children especially. And last, require the creation of partnership and coordination between all stakeholders including different agencies, development organization and NGOs and specifically with parents and individuals with disability. So this policy also gusto sila makipag-cooperate sa mga NGOs, especially the parents and all stakeholders nga mas ma-address or matagaag justice ning mga disabled students or ng mga special needs nga students para mas ma-success ang goal ani nga policy. In addition, As part of the overall legislation and policy for inclusive education, governments need to commit to investing in and supporting the recruitment and training of teachers with disabilities. This will necessitate the removal of any legislative or policy barriers that require candidates to fulfill specific medical eligibility criteria, as well as a provision of reasonable accommodation for their participation as teachers. Their presence in school will serve four fundamental goals. Four fundamental goals. First, it will promote equal rights to people with disabilities to enter the teaching profession. So it's a very advantage if you have as yourself as a disabled person. If you have teacher that has these disabilities, it will um, help you your confidence be boost and gain knowledge and experience, because also your teacher is disabled and you can see his or her success in front of you, even she or he have disabilities. So it's a very good addition uh, for school. If you have that kind of teacher, it will encourage disabled students to be more determined and perseverance in their life, even that they have disabilities. Second, teacher with disabilities will bring a unique understanding of living with impairments and the adjustment that are necessary to include learners with disabilities. So teachers with disabilities in school, it's a very good advantage knowing that uh, there's a disabled person in a school, and she can or she or he will really understand, and he will really understand the students. Mas maipalaan niya, mas mailhan niya ang isang estudyante, and mas makahatag siya mga adjustments sa isa ka disabled students, kay knowing that the teachers also are disabled. So makarelate sila sa isa't isa. So mas mas kuan siya, mas matabangan ng isa ka estudyante knowing that the teacher also is disabled. So third, their presence in school will contribute to the breaking down of barriers, challenges, prejudices that assume people with disabilities lack the capacity to contribute to society on an equal basis with others. So of course, if there is a disabled person teaching in a school or any works, if there is a disabled person that's working, the stereotypes will be vanished, because dili ibig sabihin, dili pasabot nga ang isa ka tao disabled dili na siya makakaya, dili na siya makabuhat ng anong butang, dili na siya may mong successful. And this really helps students, children with a disability to really believe in themselves, that they can also go through with all the challenges, they can also success someday. And fourth, they will provide important role models for children with disabilities who are commonly denied the opportunity to see people with disabilities in adult roles to which they can aspire. So teachers or workers who is disabled, they can really be a role model for not only for disabled person, but to normal person, that how much more normal person, how much more if how much more the normal person di mag-succeed kung ang mga disabled ang mga tao nag-succeed, di ba? So mas ma-inspire sila nga kompleto ilang lawas, nga na nabuwa sila disabilities, mag-success man gani ang mga disabilities, how much more nga sila nga kompleto. Also for disabled person, children, mas ma-inspire sila, nakita nila ilang kagulingon sa mga disabled person, nga ingana mas ma-encourage sila, mas ma-determine sila, mas matagaan sila confidence nga mulabad pa silang life bisag silang kalisod. Policies and guidelines in special education. As contained in the policies and guidelines in special education, these are the followings that serve as an enrollment guide and organization of classes for children with special needs, which trained teachers should follow. So as you can see in the table below, there are columns with area of exceptionality, one grade level, multi-grade level. So this exceptionality is a disability. These are the kinds of disabilities: mental retardation, hearing impairment, visual impairment, autism, multiple disabilities, physical disabilities, health impairment, and giftedness. So, as you can see in mental retardation or in the other disabilities, there are 8 to 15 students, 7 to 15 students, 10 to 15 students, 10 to 35 students, while in multi-grade level, in mental retardation, there are only 5 to 8 students, 6 to 8 students, 5 to 6 students, 3 to 6, and so on. As you observe, one grade level is these students are in the same level, they are equal in capability, equal in age or in maturity, while in multi-grade level they are diverse students. Maybe they are in difference with age, maturity. They are diverse students. They are not the same in level. They are not the same in capability. So yes, that's why in one grade level there are more students because it's easy to handle. It's more convenient to handle if your students has the same capability. So mas dagan ang students jud sa one grade level compared to multi-grade level where they are diverse. They are not the same in capability. So 3. In cases when enrollment does not meet the required number, SPED teachers shall still be allowed to handle classes for children with special needs, preferably in the morning, and handle other subjects in the afternoon for the regular class. Other arrangements shall be made by the school heads. So if the enrollees of disabled children or students is not meet, then your students of disabled person does not meet the required number of students, SPED teacher shall still be allowed to teach them in the morning or whatever schedule. Also, they will also teach regular classes, which is the normal students. They can teach both, because knowing that the required students in SPED is not meet. So that's it. Fourth, instructional programs that the SPED teacher shall implement include the following. First, self-contained special class. This is a separate class for only one type of exceptionality that serves moderate to severe types of disabilities. So special class, this is like they are divided. Separate class are divided. This class is only for this type of this exceptionality that serves moderate to the severe types of disability. So not all disabilities are unsa ba ni dili siya isa, but they are class separately. So number 2, itinerant teaching. A traveling teacher reaches out to children with special needs in the other school or at home to provide direct and consultative services. So itinerant teaching is a teacher which travel to any home or schools to teach disabled students, disabled children. Number three, resource room, a designated place where the child with special needs enrolled in a regular school program goes to in order to make use of the specialized equipment, either in a tutorial situation or in a small group session handled by SPED teacher. So, resource room is a designated room. It's a place where a disabled person or a person with children with special needs enrolled in a regular school program that has a room that has specialized equipment uh, to be used for special children handled by SPED teachers. For pull out, a kind of program where the children enrolled in a regular class reports to the resource room for a period of time for special instruction by the SPED teacher. So this program where the child enrolled in a regular class, this is a resource room for a period of time for special instruction ginhatag sa SPED teachers. 5. Integration and mainstreaming. This refers to the enrollment of a child with special needs in a regular class with support services. There are degrees of integration and partial integration. A child with special needs enrolled in a special class and is integrated with regular children in non-academic activities like work education, physical education, art school programs, etc. Then gradually integrated in the academic subjects when qualified. In full integration, a child with special needs sits in the regular class in all academic and non-academic subjects. So you can observe the difference between integration, between partial integration and full integration, where child in partial integration is enrolled in special class with regular children in non-academic activities. They are doing non-academic activities like physical education, arts, programs, etc. While in full integration, a child with special needs sits in regular class nga na mabuhat niya ang academic and non-academic subjects. Inclusion. That is number 6. All children with disabilities, regardless of the nature and severity of their disability and needs for related services, receive their total education within the regular education classroom. So that is in inclusive education. All children with disabilities, regardless kung sa ka-severe ilang disability, sa ilang disability, an nahatagan sila ang total education within a regular education classroom. So like sagol na sila, sagol na mga kuanan diri mga disability, mga like let's put in situation nagsagol na ang na autism, na hearing impairment, na giftedness. So they are all included in one classroom, in a regular classroom, or maybe bisag ang mga na ay normal students nga nagsagol pod sa sagol pod sa mga disabled students nga na ang inclusion. So I hope you understand our topic for today. Thank you for listening.